The gravel lot at Starlight hadn't been graded in 6 years, and I could tell that just by walking across it. My mother's property had the kind of slow, patient decay that only shows up if you know what to look for. The way the drainage swale along the north fence had silted in, the way the concession block had a hairline crack running up from the foundation where water had gotten under the slab and frozen. I'd been appraising commercial land for most of my adult life, and I couldn't turn it off. I stood in the middle of the old viewing field on a warm gray afternoon and did the math I always did, whether anyone asked me to or not. 11 acres, county road frontage, a well, a crumbling screen tower that was really just a liability waiting for a windstorm and a lawsuit. You could have had the closing done in March, I said. The Halverson Group would still take it. My mother was standing at the ticket booth with the little transistor radio she kept there, the one with the cracked dial. She didn't answer right away. She'd gotten good over the years at not answering right away. "They're saying stay off Route 9, she said instead. "That's the 3rd time." "Then let's not take Route 9. Let's take the county road out and cut over. 10 minutes to my truck, 45 minutes to my place. You'll sleep in a real bed." The radio had been doing that all afternoon, cutting between a man reading county advisories in a flat voice and long stretches of dead air where the station just gave up. Something was happening east of us, over toward the city. It had started as a traffic thing on the morning report, then a hospital thing, then something the announcers stopped trying to characterize entirely. I'd driven out here to get my mother because the pictures on my phone before the signal thinned had made my stomach go cold in a way I didn't have a word for yet. "Evan," she said, "I'm not leaving." We'd had this argument before, just not with this backdrop. I opened my mouth to run the usual figures. Taxes, the well pump she'd replaced last year, the money she was pouring into keeping an empty field alive. And that was when the first vehicle slowed at the entrance. It was a green minivan, dented on the driver's side, a bicycle rack hanging empty off the back. It didn't drive past. It slowed the way people slow when they've reached a place they meant to reach, and it turned in through the open gate and came to a stop just inside. And the man who got out looked past me entirely and found my mother at the ticket booth. "Elaine," he said. Relief came off him like heat. "God. Okay, we're here." "Lonnie Parker," my mother said, and she said it like she'd been half expecting him. "Is that Carrie in there? And the kids?" Yeah, all of us." He wiped his face with the flat of his hand. "The bridge on 9's a mess, Elaine. There's cars just left in the road. We couldn't get to my brother's. I didn't know where." He stopped. "You said. You always said if it ever got bad and we couldn't reach anybody, come here." I looked at my mother. She wasn't looking at me. She was already walking toward the van, saying something to the woman in the passenger seat, telling the kids they could get out and stretch. There were picnic tables under the trees. "When did you tell him that?" I asked. "A while ago," she said over her shoulder, which was not an answer. I didn't have time to press it, because the second vehicle came in off the county road before the Parkers had their doors all the way open. An old brown Buick, a woman driving, an even older woman in the passenger seat clutching a purse against her chest, like it was the last solid thing in the world. The Buick pulled in, stopped when, and the driver leaned across and called out the window, "Is Elaine Mercer still?" and then saw her and didn't finish the sentence. "That's the Delmar sister-in-law," my mother said quietly to me, as if that explained anything. "Gene will be behind her, most likely. He never lets his family go anywhere without him following." I stood in the middle of the field where I'd been doing arithmetic about resale value. and I watched two families I had never met arrive at my mother's closed drive-in like it was the last address in the phone book that still worked. And I understood, in a slow and unpleasant way, that this was not a coincidence, and that whatever my mother had been doing out here for the last several years, I had never once appraised it correctly. By the time the lights started to go flat and orange behind the tree line, there were 9 vehicles inside the gate. They came from different directions, and they carried different stories. But they all had the same expression on arrival. That loosening around the eyes when a person who has been driving through something bad finally reaches a place they were told to reach. A young couple with a hatchback full of groceries they'd apparently been buying when the store started closing early. A retired man named Fitch's brother, then Fitch herself in a separate truck. An entire pickup bed of a family's belongings lashed down under a blue tarp. Gene Delmar did arrive behind his sister-in-law, exactly as my mother had predicted, in a work truck with an auto parts store logo faded on the door. My mother knew almost all of them, not just their names. She knew who they'd married, whose kids had graduated when, who'd had a hip replaced, who lived out past the grain elevator with no close neighbors. She moved from vehicle to vehicle in the gathering dark, and I trailed behind her because I didn't know what else to do. And I heard her ask the same questions over and over in slightly different words. Where were you trying to get to? Who's with you? Who else knows you left? Have you got people out past the county line? I thought, at the time, that she was just being kind. That this was the school secretary reflex, the church basement reflex. The way certain women of a certain generation greet a crisis by learning everybody's business so they can bring the right casserole to the right door. I pulled her aside near the concession block while the Parker kids chased each other around the picnic tables like it was any summer evening. Mom, how many of these people did you tell to come here? I don't know exactly, she said. That's not a real answer. It's the only one I've got, Evan. She looked tired, but not surprised, which was its own kind of alarming. It was over a lot of years. Some of them I told once. Some of them I probably said it to and they forgot. Some of them moved. I never wrote it down. You never wrote it down, I repeated. It wasn't a list, she said. It was a thing I said to people. Behind us, out on the county road, another set of headlights slowed at the Starlight sign. That old sign, the marquee letters half fallen out of it, so it just read Starlight, a thing I had personally recommended she pay someone to take down before it fell on a car and became her problem. The headlights slowed, hesitated, and turned in. I want to tell you what it does to a man to watch a place he has spent years describing as worthless start filling up with people who drove through a collapsing county specifically to find it. Before I get further into the night, if you're listening to this, I'd like to know where you are. What town, what state, what country. I've told this a lot of times, and I always wonder where it lands. Then I'll get back to it, because there's a lot of night left. The truth is that around then, I stopped arguing about the closing and started, without quite deciding to, working. My mother caught me at the ticket booth an hour after full dark, when the count was up past a dozen vehicles and 40-odd people. And she told me the story I should have made her tell me years earlier. She didn't dress it up. That wasn't her way. You remember the ice storm, she said. The bad one. Before your father passed, when the lines came down and the phones didn't work for 3 days. I remembered it the way you remember weather from a decade back, a general shape, some inconvenience, a tree limb through the Hendersons' carport. Wendell Cross died in that storm, she said, out on Miller Loop. He lived alone. Nobody could call anybody, and the roads were glass, and he'd fallen, and nobody knew to check on him for 2 days. He was one of my kids, 30 years before, first grade. She said it plainly. After that, I got to thinking about how, when everything ordinary quits working, the phones, the power, the way you'd normally find a person, people don't need somewhere fancy. They just need one place everybody already knows how to find. So when things settled, and the church did those emergency meetings, I started telling people, if it ever gets bad, and you can't reach anybody, and you don't know where to go, come to Starlight. Everybody knows Starlight. Everybody knows the way. You told people to come to a closed movie theater, I said. I told people to come somewhere they'd remember, she said. That's not the same thing, but I can see how it sounds to you. It did sound like something to me. It sounded, at the time, like sentiment that had gotten out of hand. An old woman turning her refusal to sell into a story that made the refusal feel like wisdom. I'm not proud of thinking that. But I'd already decided what the property was worth, and it's a hard thing to reappraise land when you've already signed the report in your head. So I did what I actually knew how to do. I walked the property with the last of the light. And here's the thing I want to be honest about, because it matters for everything that came after. The place was good, not perfect. But as a spot for frightened people to gather, it was genuinely, unexpectedly good. And I could see why in about 4 minutes of looking at it the way I'd look at any parcel. The sight lines were open. From the middle of the viewing field you could see the county road, the gate, the tree line, and the back service lane all at once, which meant nothing surprised you. The ground was flat and drained toward the north swale, mostly. The concession block was concrete and had a working roof and could shelter people if it rained. There was a well with a hand pump my mother had kept serviced. She called it the drought pump. Said she'd put it in years back so she wouldn't lose the whole property to a dry summer if the electric pump quit. There were restrooms, basic but real. There was a maintenance shed, and there were 2 ways out. The main gate onto the county road, and a gravel service lane along the south fence that connected, eventually, to the quieter farm roads. 2 exits. I noted that the way you note a load-bearing wall, 2 exits mattered. I found my mother again and told her the property was sound. I meant it as a concession. She took it as one. There's no food here to speak of, she said. I want you to understand that. This was never a place to live. There's water, and there's room, and there's a roof if it rains. That's all Starlight ever had to offer. People are bringing food, I said. The young couple's hatchback alone had enough groceries for a week if it was shared right. Some are, she said. Not all. And I don't know how many more are coming. That last sentence sat in my chest wrong, and I didn't fully understand why yet. The first night taught everyone something, and most of what it taught was that nobody had planned to be there past dark. People had come in daylight, expecting to find a plan, and instead found each other and a field. When the sun went and the temperature dropped, it was still spring, and spring nights out in the county have no mercy on people who dressed for an afternoon. The reality set in that they were going to sleep in their vehicles or on the concrete, and that there wasn't a clear answer to what happened in the morning. Water was the first real problem, and it was a small one that would have become a big one. People had been drinking from the well pump freely all evening because it was the one thing there seemed to be plenty of. But the pump was a hand pump, and it fed a holding tank that recovered slowly. And by full dark, a man was cranking it and getting a thin dribble and looking around like the well had betrayed him personally. My mother handled it before I could. She just walked over, told everyone in her old administrator's voice, the one that had moved 1,000 children through 100 fire drills, that the well needed to rest between fills, that water was for drinking and not for washing tonight, and that anyone who'd brought jugs should top them off in the morning when the tank came back. People listened to her. That was the thing about my mother I kept relearning that night. People listen to her the way they don't listen to a stranger with good information. The food sorted itself, mostly. The young couple, their name was Reyes, offered up their groceries without being asked. And a few coolers got opened, and somebody's box of granola bars got broken open for the kids. It wasn't a system. It was generosity, which is not the same as a plan. And I remember standing at the edge of it thinking that generosity runs out faster than people think. My contribution that night was a parking problem. And it's the first thing I did there that actually mattered. A family named Odom had pulled their loaded pickup, the one with the blue tarp, into the low corner of the field near the north fence. It was a natural instinct. They'd tucked into a spot that felt out of the way, near the trees, sheltered. I walked the property once more before I let myself sit down, and I stopped when I saw where they'd put it. "You'll want to move that," I told the Odom man. He was maybe 40, exhausted, not in a mood to be told anything. "It's fine where it is." "It's in the low spot," I said. "See how the ground falls toward that fence? That whole corner drains there. It hasn't rained today, but the radio's been talking about weather. And if it comes down overnight, you're going to be sitting in the one place all this water wants to go. And your truck's the heaviest thing here. You'll sink the rear axle in wet ground, and then you're not going anywhere in the morning without 3 people pushing." He looked at the corner. He looked at me. Something in the way I'd said it, not arguing, just describing what the land would do, got through. "Where then?" I pointed. "Up on the old projection pad. It's poured concrete, it's high, it drains 4 directions. Nose it out toward the lane so you're not boxed in." I paused. "You want to always be able to leave without asking anybody to move first. That's rule 1, anywhere." He moved the truck. And an hour later, when the weather the radio kept promising actually arrived, not a storm, just a cold, hard couple hours of rain, the low corner by the north fence turned into exactly the shallow pond I'd said it would, and the Odoms sat dry and high on the projection pad. And the man came and found me under the concession overhang where I was standing out of the wet. "Appreciate it," he said, and that was all, but it was enough. It's a particular feeling, being useful in a way people can see. I hadn't felt it in a while. Appraisal is a job where you're mostly right and mostly unthanked. I slept maybe 3 hours in my truck with the seat back and woke stiff and cold to a gray morning and the sound of another vehicle at the gate. Morning made things clearer and worse at the same time. Clearer, because in daylight, you could see the shape of what we had. Roughly 45 people. 14 or 15 vehicles. A well that gave water if you were patient with it. A concrete building, restrooms that worked if the septic held, open ground, 2 exits. Food that would stretch a few days if people kept sharing, and not much longer if they didn't. Worse, because the radio had gotten thinner overnight, and what came through was not reassuring. The flat-voiced man was gone. In his place was a recorded loop advising residents to remain where they were, avoid the interstate, and await instructions. Nobody was giving instructions. A pickup came in around 8, with a family who'd driven from the north end of the county. And the driver said the town of Kessler had a checkpoint that turned people back, and that he'd seen 2 people on the road outside Kessler who weren't right. That was how he put it. Weren't right, walking wrong. And that when he'd slowed to see if they needed help, they'd come at the truck fast enough that he'd stopped slowing for anybody after that. That was the first time I heard someone describe what we were all going to spend the next while. Learning to describe. He didn't have a word for it. Nobody did yet. He just said they weren't right and looked like he wished he could unsay it. I want to be careful here because I've heard this story told other ways since, with the dead everywhere and the world already ended by breakfast. That's not how it was for us, not that first full day. For us, it was mostly quiet. The horror was out at the edges. A report from the north, a road you shouldn't take. A thing somebody saw at a distance and drove away from. The county road past the gate stayed empty most of that morning, except for the occasional car that slowed and turned in. What we had mostly was uncertainty and a lot of people in one field, and the slow understanding that the uncertainty wasn't going to resolve into anybody coming to help. By mid-morning, I'd found the yellow flags. I was going through the maintenance shed, out of habit, cataloging what the property actually contained, because that's what I do. And behind a stack of folding chairs and a broken popcorn machine, I found 2 milk crates full of them. The old drive-in parking guides, yellow triangular flags on wire staffs, the kind an usher would have walked the rows with 60 years ago, waving cars into position under the big screen so everybody could see. They were faded, and some of the wire was rusted. But there were maybe 40 of them. And the second I saw them, I saw what I could do with them. Because the field was becoming a problem. Not a crisis, a problem. People had parked wherever they'd stopped, and whatever angle relief had put them at. And every new arrival threaded in wherever there was a gap. It looked like a flea market lot. It was inefficient, and inefficiency at that scale becomes danger eventually. You can't get an emergency vehicle through. You can't get anybody out fast. You waste a third of your usable ground on the gaps between badly angled cars. This was the thing I actually knew how to fix. Not zombies, not medicine, not roads, occupancy, flow. Getting the most usable capacity out of a fixed footprint. I'd done it for parking structures and shopping centers and event grounds for 25 years. I spent the middle of that day building order out of a field, and it was the best I felt the whole time I was at Starlight. I paced off the viewing field and marked rows with the yellow flags, angled rows, 45 degrees, because angled parking lets vehicles nose in and pull out without 3-point turns, and it packs more units into the same ground than perpendicular does. I laid a walking lane down the center wide enough for a person carrying a child. I kept the main gate mouth clear so nobody arriving would jam up the entrance. I put the biggest vehicles at the outside edges where their weight wouldn't matter, and the smaller ones in the middle. When new vehicles came in, I met them at the gate and walked them to a slot, and they went where I put them, because a frightened person is grateful for anyone who acts like they know where things belong. People noticed. Lonnie Parker walked the finished rows with me around noon and shook his head. "Looks like a real place now," he said. "This morning it looked like everybody just crashed here." "It's just angles," I said, but I was pleased, and I let it show more than I usually would. My mother watched me work with an expression I couldn't read at the time. Late in the afternoon, she came out to the row I was flagging and stood there until I stopped. "It's good," she said. "It is. But I want you to think about grouping people by where they're going. Put the ones headed the same direction near each other." "We don't know where everyone's going yet," I said. "Half these people haven't decided, and they're arriving in no order at all. I can't sort by destination when I don't have the destinations, and I can't leave gaps for future groups when I don't know the sizes." I meant it reasonably, and I still think it was reasonable. First thing is getting everybody off the county road and parked so nobody's blocking anybody. We sort the rest out once it settles. She didn't fight me on it. That wasn't her way either. She just said one more thing, and I heard it as a small preference rather than the warning it was. "Keep the south lane clear," she said. "The service lane along the fence. Whatever else you do, don't let anything crowd that lane. I'm not blocking it, I said, a little short, because I was proud of the fact that I understood egress better than anybody there. And it stung a little to be told the obvious. There's 2 ways out. I know what the exits are for. And I didn't block it. I want that on the record. I never once put a vehicle across the south service lane. But my rows fed toward it, and my angled slots on the south side needed room to swing out into it. And every new car I fit into my beautiful, efficient layout borrowed a little of the space around that lane. And I didn't notice, because a lane that's clear looks clear right up until the moment several vehicles all need to use it at once. The second wave came the next day, and it came with better information and more mouths in the same breath. Gail Fitch found me by the concession block mid-morning with a folded county road map she'd gotten from somewhere and a look on her face, like a woman who'd spent 30 years being right about roads and was about to be right about them again. "You the one running the parking?" she said. It wasn't quite a question. "I'm helping organize it, yeah." "Then you need to hear this from me because I drove these roads for the district before most of these people were born." She spread the map on a picnic table and put a blunt finger down. "Route 9 East is gone, you know that. The interstate's a parking lot, everybody knows that. But here's what folks don't know. The Blackwater Bridge on the county road south." She tapped it. "It's a low bridge, and it's been posted for wait for 2 years because the district wouldn't fix it. If we get the rain they keep promising, that thing floods its approaches. Half a day of hard rain, and it's underwater, and it's the only paved way south for 8 miles. So the south route has a clock on it," I said. "Everything's got a clock on it now," she said. "That's what nobody wants to hear. A road's not open or closed. It's open till it isn't, and you don't always get told when it changes." She refolded the map. "There's a family here trying to get to Warren County, to their people. Older couple, the Cranes, and the woman that came with them, her mother's down there. That's south, across Blackwater. If they're going, they should go while that bridge is dry, and it's not going to be dry long." That was Gail's whole contribution, delivered in about 90 seconds, and it was worth more than anything I'd done with 100 yellow flags. She didn't know how to fix a car or fight anything. She knew which roads betrayed you and when, and that turned out to be one of the most valuable things a person could know. At almost the same time, Gene Delmar was giving me a different education over by the vehicle rows. He'd been walking the cars all morning, hands in his pockets, doing the thing men who've worked around vehicles their whole lives do, which is diagnose things at a glance without meaning to. He stopped me and jerked his chin at a maroon sedan in my third row. "That one belonged to the couple with the little girl. The Cranes are riding with them, I heard." "I think so. Why?" "Battery's going." He said it flat. "Look at it. See how they got it nosed in, but they left the dome light on all night? People do that. They're scared. They want a light. That's an old battery to start with. I can hear it in how it cranked when they moved it yesterday. Slow. It caught this time. It might not catch next time, and if it's going to sit here another day getting drawn down, it definitely won't." He shrugged. "I got jumper cables. But you don't want to find out a battery's dead at the exact minute you need to leave in a hurry. You want to know now." I hadn't thought about it at all. I'd cataloged that sedan as one unit, one slot, one line in my mental occupancy chart. I hadn't thought about whether it would start. To me, a parked car was a solved problem. To Gene, a parked car was a machine that was quietly getting less reliable every hour it sat. And if you were going to bet people's lives on it starting, you'd better test that bet before you needed it. "Can you go through them?" I asked. "The ones people might have to leave in? Tell me which ones I shouldn't trust for a long drive." That's the smartest thing anybody said to me since I got here. Gene said, and he meant it as approval. And I felt the ground shift a little under my confidence. Because I'd been thinking of the vehicles as parking, Gene was thinking of them as departures. And departures were the whole point, if only I'd understood that yet. That afternoon, while the site hummed along in what I can only call an unnerving normalcy, Dale Purcell handled something I'd have gotten wrong. Dale was an older woman who did home health work, and she'd arrived on the first day with a bag of ordinary supplies. Blood pressure cuff, some over-the-counter things, the kind of kits somebody who takes care of the elderly carries as a matter of course. She was not a nurse and said so freely, but she had an eye I didn't have. There was an old man among the Delmar group, Gene's uncle by marriage, a big, quiet fellow named Otis, who'd been sitting in a lawn chair in the shade all day, not bothering anybody. I'd walked past him a dozen times and registered him as content, low maintenance, a person who wasn't a problem. Dale walked past him once and stopped. I watched her crouch by his chair and talk to him low and take his wrist and look at his ankles. And then she came and found me because I was the one who seemed to be organizing things. That man needs shade and water, and he needs to move his legs every little while, and somebody needs to make sure he does it because he won't ask. She said it without drama. He's not drinking. Old folks stop feeling thirsty. And in this warm and no AC and the stress, he'll go downhill quiet. His ankles are swelling and his color's off. He's not sick exactly. He's just an old man in a hard situation. And old men in hard situations die of things nobody notices until it's too late because they don't make noise about it. "What do you need?" I asked. A cup of water in his hand every hour, whether he wants it or not. Somebody walking him to the restroom and back every couple hours, so he's using those legs. And I want him moved to the concession building tonight, not left in a car. He shouldn't sleep sitting up. She looked at me steady. "You've got everybody sorted by where their car fits. That's fine, but people don't come in sizes that fit slots. Some of them need more than a parking space." That was the second time in one day somebody told me, kindly, that I was organizing the field correctly and the people wrong. I didn't have language for it yet, but I was starting to feel the gap between the two things. I could tell you the usable square footage of the concession building to the foot. I could not have told you which of the 45 people in it was quietly dying in a lawn chair. My mother could have. Dale could. I was learning that a place and the people in it are two different problems, and I had only ever been trained on one of them. We moved Otis inside. Dale set up her water every hour system with a couple of the teenagers running it. And that evening, for a stretch of maybe 2 hours around sundown, Starlight felt like it might actually work. I remember it clearly because of how rare the feeling was. The rain had held off. The well tank had recovered, and there was water. Somebody had a camp stove going, and the smell of real food cooking drifted across the field. The Reyes kid and the Parker kids had organized some game with a tennis ball in the center lane. Gene was under the hood of the maroon sedan with a work light, cheerful in his element, testing his theory about the battery. Gail had 3 people around her map, sorting out who was going which way. My mother sat at a picnic table with a spiral notebook. I noticed the notebook then for the first time, writing something as she talked to a woman I didn't know. I walked the flagged rows in the last light, and they were clean and orderly, and I felt, God help me, like I had built something. Lonnie clapped me on the shoulder as he passed. "Real place," he said again, and grinned. I thought we had a shot. I want you to know that I genuinely thought that evening that we might all be all right, and that my mother's strange sentimental refusal to sell an empty field had somehow turned out to be the most practical decision anyone in the county had made. I was half right about that, which is the worst way to be right. The trouble started the next morning, and it started, as trouble usually does, with good information arriving at a bad time. Gail came to me at first light, before most people were up, and she was already dressed and already worried. "It rained north of us in the night," she said. "You didn't feel it here, but I heard it on the radio before it quit. There was a line of storms up the watershed. That water's coming down Blackwater now, right now, whether it rains another drop on us or not. That bridge is going to close today, Evan. Maybe by noon. The Cranes and the Warrens have got to move this morning, or they're not going south at all." It was the exact thing she'd warned me about. Arriving faster than I'd taken it seriously. A road with a clock on it, and the clock had run further than anyone thought. "Okay," I said. "Let's get them out. How many vehicles?" "That's the thing," Gail said. "It's not clean." And it wasn't. Here is where I finally understood what I'd built and what I'd built it for. The people who needed to leave for Warren County that morning were spread across 3 vehicles. The older Crane couple in their own car, the Warren woman and her mother in the maroon sedan Jean had been worried about, and a 4th person, a man named Pruitt, who lived down that way and had agreed to travel with them because Gail wanted a driver who knew the roads in that group. 4 households, in effect, needing to leave together, in 3 vehicles. I had parked those 3 vehicles in 3 different rows, because I'd parked them as they arrived, in the order they arrived, into whatever slot fit them best at the time. I had optimized the field for storage. I had not once considered that vehicles might need to leave together, because I had been thinking of Starlight as a place where cars were kept, not a place where groups departed. The Crane's car was in the 2nd row, boxed on both sides by vehicles belonging to families who were staying and were still asleep. The maroon sedan was in the 3rd row, and to get it out, you had to swing wide into the center lane, and the center lane at its south end fed toward the service lane. The south lane, the one my mother had told me to keep clear. Pruitt's truck was all the way at the north edge, nose in against the fence, because that was where I'd put the big vehicles, which meant it needed room to back, and turn that the tight rows around it no longer had. I stood in the gray morning light and looked at my clean, efficient, admired rows. And for the first time, I saw them the way Jean saw cars and the way Gail saw roads. Not as they were, as what they'd do when you needed something from them. They'd do the opposite of what I needed. It took 2 hours to move 3 vehicles, and every minute of it was a lesson. First, we had to find keys. People had scattered, sleeping in cars, in the concession building, at the picnic tables. And half the drivers I needed to shift the blocking vehicles weren't where their cars were. I had to wake the Odom man to move his truck so the Cranes could get out, and he was decent about it but slow. And his kids woke and cried, and that woke the family next to them. Every vehicle I needed to move to free a departure was itself a household of tired, frightened people who had to be found, woken, and asked to give up the spot they'd finally settled into. Then the maroon sedan wouldn't start. Jean had been right, and worse than right. The battery that had cranked slow the day before didn't crank at all now. It just clicked. The Warren woman looked at it like it was a personal betrayal. Her mother waiting in the passenger seat with a small bag on her lap, and the clock on the Blackwater Bridge running the whole time. Jean got his cables and got his truck nosed close, which meant moving 2 more vehicles, because in my tidy rows, there wasn't room to bring a truck alongside the sedan. He jumped it. It caught, finally, but he shook his head at me over the running engine. "This gets them to Warren County if nothing goes wrong," he said quietly. "It won't take a second failure. Somebody down there better have a battery for them, because this one's done. I told you yesterday. You want to know a car's bad before you're standing on the road needing it, not after. He wasn't gloating. He was just telling me the truth I hadn't wanted to schedule around. Then there was the noise. 3 engines running, doors slamming, people calling to each other across the field, a truck backing and beeping. Starlight had been so quiet, and now it wasn't. And I saw more than one person turn to look at the tree line. Nobody said the word. But the reports had been coming in for 2 days now, about things drawn to sound and movement. And every one of us was doing the same private arithmetic about how far 3 running engines carried across a still morning in an empty county. I found myself wanting them gone, not just for the bridge, but for the silence. And the South Lane. When we finally had all 3 departing vehicles freed and idling and pointed the right way, they had to go out the south service lane, because taking them out the main gate meant threading them back through the whole field the wrong direction. And the south lane, the lane I had sworn I kept clear, the lane I had been faintly insulted to be told to protect, was too tight. My angled south row slots, the ones I was so proud of, all needed to swing out into that lane to clear. And with the departing vehicles trying to move through it at the same time, there wasn't room for both. We had to move 2 more parked cars just to give the departure enough width to make the turn out onto the gravel. I stood in the middle of it, directing, sweating, and I understood the shape of my mistake completely. My layout was a warehouse. I had designed it to store the maximum number of vehicles in a fixed space, and I had done that beautifully. But nobody had come to Starlight to be stored. They'd come to gather, and then to move. And a warehouse is exactly the wrong shape for a place that people need to leave from in coordinated groups. I had optimized for the one thing the situation didn't want. The 3 vehicles finally pulled out onto the south lane and turned down toward the farm roads, the maroon sedan running rough but running. Gail standing at the end of the lane, waving them the right way like she was flagging a school bus through an intersection. They made the Blackwater Bridge. I found out later they crossed it with the water already up over the approach, the last vehicles across before it closed for good. Gail's clock had been right to the hour. They got out. But it had taken 2 hours, and the moving of 6 vehicles that didn't need to go anywhere. And it had done it with noise and delay at the exact moment we needed neither. And every single one of those problems had come out of the thing I had built with pride. I found my mother by the ticket booth after the dust from the south lane had settled, and I was angry. Though I couldn't have told you at first whether I was angry at her, at myself, or at the situation. That was a mess, I said. That should have taken 10 minutes, and it took 2. I know, she said. I watched it. You told me to keep that lane clear. I kept it clear. I never put a car in it. I heard how defensive I sounded and kept going anyway. But my rows all dump into it, and there's no room to swing, and I built the whole field so people would fit and not so they could leave, and I stopped. You saw this coming. I saw it might, she said. I didn't have the words for it the way you do. I just knew people would need to leave in bunches, and your rows were made for them to stay put. I looked out at the field. The good, clean rows, the yellow flags, faded and rusted, that I'd been so pleased to find. I'd built a place for people to remain, at a place my mother had spent years telling people about, specifically so that they wouldn't have to remain anywhere. How many people did you tell to come here? I asked her. And this time I wasn't going to accept, I don't know. She was quiet for a moment. Then she did the thing I'd been asking for, which was try to actually count. I told the church group, back after the ice storm. That was maybe a dozen families, but that was years ago, and some are gone. I told the school families over the years, parents I trusted, ones who lived far out, ones who lived alone. I told the volunteer fire auxiliary. I told people I met at the senior center, the ones with nobody close by. She was counting on her fingers, not the people, but the groups. And I watched the number climb in her face and watched her not like it. I said it to a lot of people, Evan, over a lot of years, not all at once. I never thought of it as a total. Give me a number. 50, she said. Then, honestly, 60 maybe. 50 or 60 families if I add it all up over all that time. But not all of them will come. Half of them probably forgot. Some moved away. Some have their own plans, their own people. Some... She didn't finish that one. Some won't be able to get here. 50 or 60 families. We had, at that point, maybe 18 families. I had spent the morning discovering that Starlight could barely coordinate the departure of 3 vehicles. And my mother was telling me that as many as 3 or 4 times the current population might still, over the coming days, arrive. We can't hold 50 families here, I said. We can barely hold what we've got. The well won't do it. The restrooms won't do it. The food's already going to run short in days. And if I can't get 3 cars out clean, I sure as hell can't manage 60 families arriving and leaving. Mom, this place can't be a shelter for that many people. It just can't. I know, she said. And she said it so simply, with so little defense, that it stopped me. It was never supposed to be. I looked across the rows I'd built. Neat and angled and useless for the one thing that mattered. Then I looked past them, toward the county road, where a pair of headlights had slowed at the Starlight sign. Another one, always another one, slowing at that half-broken marquee that still somehow told people they'd found the place. If it was never supposed to hold everyone, I said, then what did you think was going to happen when they got here? What were people supposed to do? My mother watched the headlights turn in through the gate. Find each other, she said. Find out which roads were still good. Figure out who was going the same way and put them together. Match the ones who couldn't manage on their own to somebody who could. And then leave. In little groups, headed where they needed to go. So there'd be room for whoever came next. She turned and looked at me, and there was no triumph in it. Just a tired old woman who'd carried a plan for years, without ever being able to say it out loud to the one person who kept telling her to sell it. It was never a place to stay, Evan, she said. It was a place to find each other. After that, they were always supposed to keep moving. The headlights she was watching came the rest of the way in, a sedan with a cracked windshield and 4 people in it. A man driving, a woman beside him. 2 teenagers in back who had the flattened look of kids who'd been told to be quiet for too many hours. The man rolled his window down and said, before anything else, "We're looking for Elaine Mercer," my wife's aunt said. "I'm Elaine," my mother said, and started toward them. And there it was. The whole problem in one sentence. Starlight needed to empty, and Starlight was still filling. And both of those things were true at the same instant. And I could either stand there feeling the size of it, or I could go to work. I went to work. "Don't park them in a row," I said, catching my mother's arm before she could wave the sedan toward my beautiful, useless slots. "Where are they trying to get to? Ask first." She looked at me. Something passed between us that wasn't quite agreement, but was close enough. Then she leaned to the window and asked the man where they were headed. And he said his wife had a brother with a place up near Colby, north end of the county. And my mother nodded and pointed the sedan not to a parking row, but to the open ground near the concession block, off to the side where nothing else was. "Put anybody going north over here," she said to me. "That's the idea, isn't it? what you were saying I had wrong. That's the idea, I said. It's a strange thing to have your mother hand your own correction back to you, then mean it as help. I didn't have time to feel it properly. I got the milk crate of yellow flags, and I started undoing what I'd built. Not all at once. You can't just tell 40 people to move their cars for no reason they can see. But I stopped feeding the tidy rows, and I started staging by direction instead. North grouped near the concession block. South was gone now with Blackwater, so nobody went there. West, toward the county line and the roads that ran up out of the river bottoms, I staged near the main gate, the undecided. And there were a lot of undecided people who'd come because they were told to come and hadn't thought past arriving. I kept loose in the center, where I could sort them once they knew their own minds. The old row started to dissolve into something messier and better. My mother worked one side of it, and I worked the other. And in the middle of the field was her spiral notebook, which I finally looked at properly. It wasn't a plan. I want to be clear about that. It was a mess. Names in her cramped hand, some crossed out, arrows connecting one family to another, little notes in the margins. Sister in Colby, no phone, and Ruth's boy has the truck, and Delmar's will take one more. It was the least organized document I had ever seen, and it contained information I could not have generated in a week of walking the property. She knew who was going north because she knew people had family north. She knew the Sedan family and the Colby man could probably ride the same road because she knew the aunt who'd sent them. "You've been keeping this the whole time," I said. "Since the first day. It's just so I don't forget who's who." She flipped a page. "I can't hold it all in my head anymore, not this many. Can I add to it?" She looked at me like I'd offered to help carry something heavy. Add what? Which vehicles can actually make a trip? Which ones can't? How many seats each one has? You've got the people and the destinations. You don't have the machines. I tapped the page. We put them together. We've got something. The first group we sent out with the new system was 3 families headed west. And it took 11 minutes from decision to gone. I know it was 11 because Lonnie Parker timed it, half joking, standing at the gate with his arms crossed like a man at a ball game. He'd watched the southbound mess 2 mornings back. He wanted to see if we'd learned anything. We had. The difference wasn't cleverness. It was order of operations. The southbound morning. We'd started engines and then discovered we couldn't move. This time, we did everything before anybody turned a key. Gene walked the 3 vehicles first while the families were still standing around them. A pickup, a wagon, and an SUV. He put his hand flat on the wagon's hood, listened to it turn over, checked the tires with his boot toe, and pronounced it fine for a shorter run, but not for a hard one. Which was okay, because west wasn't a hard run yet. He looked at the SUV and frowned and said the front passenger tire was low and had a slow leak. And he put the spare on it right there, with 2 of the men helping, before anybody was in a hurry. That was the whole trick. He fixed it while it was boring instead of when it was terrifying. Meanwhile, Elaine and I did the seats. The 3 vehicles together had room for more people than the 3 families held, which mattered, because there was a woman named Pearl who'd arrived alone in a car Gene didn't trust, and who had a cousin out west she wanted to reach. My mother knew Pearl. My mother knew the cousin. So Pearl left her doubtful car parked at Starlight and rode west in the wagon with a family who was glad of the company. And that was the first time I watched a person get detached from the vehicle they arrived in and reattached to a group instead. And I saw how much sense it made. Gail stood at the map on the picnic table and gave them the road. Not a guarantee, a description. County 12 West is your best bet. It's gravel past the Hensarling place, but it's high and dry, and it stays open in weather. Don't take the paved cut through Dunmore. There's a report of cars left in the road there. When you hit the county line, you'll want to bear north, not south, whatever the signs say, because south drops you toward the interstate, and you don't want the interstate. She said it twice, slowly, until the lead driver could say it back to her. Then, and only then, the engine started. The three vehicles pulled out the main gate in a loose line with one of the yellow flags stuck upright in the wagon's window so the SUV behind could keep sight of it. And they were gone west in under a minute. And the field where they'd been staged was suddenly open ground again. Lonnie uncrossed his arms. 11 minutes, he said. That other morning was 2 hours. Different problem, I said. That morning I was moving furniture. This morning we moved people. I didn't say it to be wise. It just came out that way. And my mother heard it. And she didn't say anything. But she wrote something in the notebook, and I saw it later. Next to the West group, she'd written Pearl too. And then underneath, in smaller letters, Evan's seat idea. She was keeping track of what worked, same as I was. For most of that day, Starlight did the thing it had always been meant to do. And it was almost beautiful to watch. People arrived scared and alone, and left in 3s and 4s with somewhere to go. A man who'd driven in with an empty tank got siphoned enough fuel from 2 departing vehicles to reach his brother-in-law's, because his brother-in-law's was north. And a northbound family had a full tank and a soft heart. An old couple who couldn't have managed a back road alone got folded into a group with a younger driver who knew the way. Information moved as fast as people did. Every arrival brought a road report, and Gail updated her map. And the next group out knew more than the last. The population of the field went down, even as cars kept turning in at the gate. That was the whole elegance of it. It was a place you passed through, not a place you stayed. And when you ran it that way, it could handle far more people than it could ever have sheltered. Because nobody stayed long enough to use up the water or the restrooms or the food. Movement was the resource. Every group that left made room for the fear coming up the county road behind them. By late afternoon, we'd sent out 4 groups. West, north, north again. And one small one east toward a rural crossroads a family knew. My mother's notebook had pages of crossed-out names, which is a good thing in that context. A crossed-out name meant somebody was on a road toward somewhere instead of standing in a field. I found Dale sitting with the old man, Otis, in the shade of the concession building, and she flagged me down. When Otis goes, she said, and he's going with the Delmars north, he can't be in the back of Jean's truck. I know it's got the most room, but he can't climb up into it, and he can't ride 2 hours bouncing on a bench with his legs down. He needs a seat that reclines a little, and he needs to be able to get out to use the restroom without a production. I'd already mentally assigned Otis to Jean's truck. Most seats, most room, the obvious call. The Delmar sedan's got less space, but it's a real seat, I said, working it. Reclines, low step in. Then he rides in the sedan, and something else rides in the truck, Dale said. You keep wanting to put the most people in the biggest box. That's fine for boxes. He's not a box. She was right, and it was the second time I'd made almost the same error. Optimizing the container instead of the contents. I moved Otis to the sedan and put the group's bags and a couple of the teenagers in Jean's truck bed instead, which the teenagers thought was an adventure, which was fine. Dale watched me do it and gave me a small nod that I valued more than I'd have admitted. I was getting better. I want to be honest that I was also still me. I fixed the Otis thing after Dale caught it, not before. My eyes still went to the space before it went to the person. But the gap between the two was closing, an hour at a time, and I could feel it closing. The first hard road news came in the early evening, riding in with a family in a mud-splashed truck who'd tried to go west an hour behind our third group and turned back. County 12's still open, the man said, but there's water coming up over the ford past the Henserling place. It was fine this morning, they told us. It wasn't fine by the time we got there. We watched a car ahead of us go halfway and think better of it. Gail went still at the map. The ford, she said, not the bridge. The low crossing before the gravel starts. The one with no rail. Yeah. She swore under her breath, which I'd never heard her do. That means the same water that killed Blackwater is working its way across the whole low country. It's not one road. It's the whole watershed coming up. She looked at me. West just got a clock on it, too. Small vehicles, maybe, if they go now and go fast. Anything heavy, or anybody slow, that Ford's going to stop them by morning. This was the thing I'd learned to hear now. A road wasn't open or closed. West had been our best route all day, and now it had a window closing on it. And the window was measured in hours. And I had a north group half-staged and a decision to make about whether to shove a west group out the gate immediately before the Ford drowned or hold them and lose the road. My mother wanted to hold. That was the first real disagreement of the new phase, and it was quiet, the way our disagreements were. There's a family I'm expecting west, she said. The Odells. Verna Odell's got 2 grandkids she keeps. If they come, they'll want west. That's where their people are. If we send the west group now, and the Odells show up in an hour, they've got no group and a dead Ford. If we hold the west group for the Odells and the Odells don't come, I said, we lose the Ford for the people who are already standing here. The Odells might be 20 minutes out. They might be dead, Mom. They might have gone somewhere else. They might have forgotten you told them 10 years ago about a movie theater. I said it as gently as I could, and it still landed hard. We can't hold a route open for people who aren't here on the chance they're coming. That's how everybody drowns. She didn't answer right away. She looked out at the gate, at the empty county road, at the light going long and gold across the field. Send them, she said finally. The ones who are here. Send them now. We sent them. 2 vehicles, 5 people, out the gate at a pace that wasn't quite reckless, with Gail's Ford warning ringing in the lead driver's ears. If it's over the road, you turn around. You do not try it. There's no west worth dying in a ditch for. They made the Ford. I know because they were the last ones who did. The Odells never came. I don't know what happened to the Odells. My mother crossed their name off the notebook 3 days later, not because she'd given up on them, but because there was no west left to send them toward. And a name with no road beside it isn't a plan anymore. It's just a name. That night, the Outbreak came to the county road for the first time. Not a horde. I need to keep saying that because the way these things get told afterward, it's always a wall of the dead. It wasn't. It was 3 of them, spread out, coming up the county road from the east in the last of the light, moving wrong the way people had been describing for days. Not fast, but not stopping either, drawn by something. The vehicles, probably. The movement. The simple fact that Starlight was the only place in a dark and emptying county where anything was still happening. Lonnie saw them first from the gate and didn't shout, which was the right instinct, and came and found me instead. 3 of them on the road, he said, maybe 400 yards east, coming this way slow. I looked. He was right, and I felt the old instinct rise up, the one every man feels. which is to think about how to defend the place, where the choke points were, how you'd hold the gate. I actually caught myself looking at the concession block, thinking concrete, thinking a building you could get people into. And I had to stop and hear how stupid it was. We were not going to defend Starlight. Starlight was an open field with a chain-link gate and a marquee with half its letters gone. It could not be defended, and it was never supposed to be. The whole point of the place was that you didn't stay. We don't fight that, I told Lonnie. We just don't let it in, and we keep the noise down, and we deal with it if it gets to the gate. But mostly, we keep doing what we're doing, only quieter. We closed the gate. There was an actual gate, an old chain-link swing gate my mother had kept because it kept teenagers out. And it turned out to be worth more than the screen tower. We killed the unnecessary lights. We told people staying the night to stay in or near their vehicles and to keep it down. And we watched the three of them come up the road. Two of them wandered past in the dark, drawn by nothing in particular, or by everything, and kept going west up the empty road toward the ford, which struck me as its own small mercy. The water would stop them if nothing else did. The third one reached the gate. It got its hands in the chain link and pulled and made a sound I'm not going to describe. And a couple of the teenagers who saw it started to lose their composure. And it was Gene, of all people, who handled it. He came up with a long-handled shovel from the maintenance shed, and he did what had to be done through the fence, practically and without a word, the way a man deals with a downed animal on a road. And then he leaned the shovel against the fence and said, "We'll want to keep that clear," meaning the ground on the far side, meaning the next one, and went back to his truck. Nobody made it a thing. That was the tone we'd found without deciding to. Practical. You handle what comes to the gate, and you don't turn it into a battle, because a battle draws more and keeps people up and doesn't change the plan, which is to leave. But I understood, standing there in the dark, listening to my own pulse, that the county road was no longer a road you could linger beside. The gate could not stay casually open. Arrivals and departures now had to be managed, watched, spaced. The clock I kept talking about had stopped being just about the roads. It was about the place itself now. By morning, we had a vehicle problem that forced the clearest decision I made at Starlight. A family had come in overnight. The Bidwells, a couple with a boy of maybe 10, in a big older van that had gotten them all the way from the far side of the county on what turned out to be borrowed time. Gene went to it after breakfast with his hand already telling him something before he opened the hood. "This isn't going anywhere," he said when he'd looked. "Head gasket's going, I think, or worse. It's been running hot a long while. Look at the residue. It got them here. It's not getting them another 40 miles. Not on a back road, not in this heat, not with 3 people in it." He wiped his hands on a rag. "I could maybe nurse it if I had a shop and a day in the parts. I don't have any of the 3. The Bidwells were heading the same direction as a group I had staging near the concession block, north toward the Colby end, the same direction as the Sedan family from the day before. And the north group had seats. Not many, but enough, if you counted them the new way instead of the old way. The Bidwell man didn't want to hear it. I understood why. That van was everything they had. It was their fuel, their shelter, their independence, the box that held their whole life. Leaving it behind felt like giving up the last thing that was theirs. "We'll just take it slow," he said. "We'll stop and let it cool. We got it this far." "You got it this far downhill and cool in the morning," Gene said, not unkindly. "The road north's got a grade past the reservoir. It'll cook on that grade. And when it dies, it'll die somewhere out there with nobody around and no shovel." He didn't gesture at the fence where the shovel still leaned, but he didn't have to. I stepped in then, and I said the thing that would have been unthinkable to the version of me who'd shown up here a week earlier counting units. "Leave the van," I said. "You ride north with the Purcell group. There's room for 3 if the 2 boys share the back seat, and they will, because they're 10. I looked at the man. "I know it's yours. I know what it means. But the van is a thing, and your boy is not. And there's a road north that's open this morning and might not be tomorrow. And I can put your family on it right now in a vehicle that'll actually get there." He looked at his wife. His wife looked at the boy. And he said, "What do we do with it?" Meaning the van. And I said, "We push it over to the edge and we leave it. And if it means anything to you, somebody someday might find it and get a part off it that saves them. But you're not it. Not today." They left the van. We rolled it, 4 of us, over to the fence line out of the way. And the Bidwells rode north an hour later in the middle of a group. The boy delighted to be in a different car with a different kid. The parents quiet in the way people are quiet when they've set something down they'd been carrying too long. I stood and watched the empty van at the fence line and felt no version of the thing I would once have felt, which was the itch to solve the vehicle. A vehicle you can't fix isn't a problem to solve. It's just a place a family used to be. The route that failed was the eastern one, and it failed by coming back. We'd sent a group east the day before toward that rural crossroads a family knew. 4 people in a good truck, a solid choice. Gail had blessed the road. They'd been gone 18 hours, and I'd crossed them off the mental list and turned my attention to the living problem of the day. Then late that morning, the truck came back in the gate, and I felt my stomach drop, because a group coming back is a group that hit something. The driver got out looking 10 years older. "Can't get through," he said. "The crossroads there's a wreck. A tanker or a big rig jackknifed across the whole intersection and burned. Looks like days ago. And there's cars piled behind it. And there's..." He stopped. "There's some of them around it. The dead ones. A lot of them. Drawn to the cars? I don't know. We couldn't get within a quarter mile. There's no way through and no way around that we could find." Here was the test. A group coming back into a place I'd finally gotten flowing outward. The old me would have had them parked somewhere and created a new blockage while I figured it out. The new me had somewhere to put them, because I'd stopped thinking of open ground as storage and started thinking of it as circulation. "Bring them into the center," I told him. "Don't shut off. Just idle in the middle where you've got room to turn." Then, to my mother, already moving, "East is dead. Everybody I've got staged for East or thinking about East, we need to resort them right now before they leave and hit that wreck." And we did it, the whole apparatus of it, in maybe half an hour. Gail redrew the picture. With East gone and South gone and West closing, the only reliable direction left was north, up out of the low country onto higher ground, where the water wasn't a factor and the big roads weren't a draw. The returning Eastern group had family East, and now had no East to go to. And my mother sat with them at the picnic table with her notebook and worked out that the wife had a second cousin north, not close, but north. And north was where the road was, and so their whole destination changed at a picnic table because the map had changed under them. I watched my mother do that. Take a family whose plan had died on a burning road, and in 15 minutes, give them a new person to aim at in the one direction that was still open. And I understood, finally and completely, what she'd built out here. It was never about the field. The field was just the place where the information lived long enough for people to trade it. She was a switchboard. She'd been a switchboard the whole time, for 17 years. and I'd been trying to sell the building. That afternoon, my mother made her mistake, and it was the same shape as her strength, which is how it always is. A single vehicle came in, an older woman driving alone named Corinne, who'd been a teacher's aide at one of my mother's schools 30 years back. My mother lit up seeing her the way she did with the old ones. Corinne was heading nowhere in particular. She'd had a plan, and the plan had involved a sister who no longer answered. And now she was just a frightened woman in a field who'd remembered the one thing anybody had ever told her to do in an emergency. North was leaving in 40 minutes. The last clean North group of the day, because we'd stopped running groups after dark now with the road the way it was. Corinne could have gone with them. There was a seat. My mother didn't put her in it. "Let her rest a minute," she told me. "She just got here. She's shaking. She can go with the morning group. There's people I'm still expecting from her part of the county, the Hardigans. They were close with Corinne's family. If they come tonight, she'd want to go with them. Familiar faces. She'll travel better with people she knows." I almost let it go. It was a small thing, and Corinne did look shaken, and there was a human logic to it. But I'd learned something from the Odells, and I made myself say it. "Mom, there might not be a morning North group. Gail says the water's still coming up. If the Reservoir Road goes overnight, North closes too, and then Corinne's not resting. She's stuck." I kept my voice level. "You want to send her with people she knows. I get it. But the road doesn't care who she knows. The road cares that she goes while it's open." My mother looked at Corinne, sitting on the tailgate of her car with a paper cup of water in both hands. And I watched her want to be right about the Hardigans, want the network to work the way it was supposed to work, want the reward of having waited to be that Corinne got to travel with friends instead of strangers. "Ask her," my mother said finally. "It's her choice, not mine." We asked her. Corinne, God bless her, was not sentimental about it. "I'll go now," she said. "I'd rather go with strangers on an open road than wait for friends on a closed one." And she went, in the last North group, 40 minutes later, in a stranger's back seat. And the Reservoir Road did go overnight. Gail was right. And there was no morning North group. And if my mother had held Corinne for the Hardigans, Corinne would have been standing in the field the next day, with nowhere left to point her. The Hardigans never came either. My mother didn't cross them off. She left their name uncrossed, with no road beside it. And I understood by then that some of the names in that notebook were never going to get a road, and that carrying that was part of what the notebook cost her. She said one thing to me that evening, quietly, doing dishes at the well pump with the last of the light. "You were right about Corinne. You were right to ask her instead of deciding for her." "Both then," she said. And that was as close as either of us came to the whole argument, and it was enough. The next morning, we understood that Starlight's job was almost over. And we understood it the way we'd learned to understand everything out there. Through a road report and a vehicle assessment and a count. Gail laid it out at the map with Jean beside her and my mother across the table and me standing over the whole thing. It was the closest we ever came to a council. And it lasted about 10 minutes, because everybody said their piece inside their own competence, and nobody made a speech. "Here's the roads," Gail said. "South's gone, has been. East's got a burned wreck and the dead all over it. West's ford is underwater and staying under. North was our last good one, and the Reservoir Road went last night." She put her finger flat on the map and dragged it. "There is one way north left. This one. The old county grade up past the quarry. It's steep and it's rough, and it's slow, and I wouldn't send a low car up it. But it's high and it's dry, and nothing's blocking it that I know of." She looked up. That's the whole board. One road, and it's the worst one, and I don't know how long it lasts either. And the vehicles, Gene said, taking his turn. We've been sending the good ones out for days, which was right. But it means what's parked here now is the leftovers. Half of what's still in this field I wouldn't trust to the corner store, let alone a quarry grade. He nodded at the abandoned Bidwell van, at Pearl's doubtful car, at a couple of others. We've got maybe 5 vehicles left I'd put people in for that road. 5. And we've got... He glanced at my mother. 22 people still here, my mother said. She didn't have to check the notebook. She knew. Counting us. 5 vehicles, 1 bad road, 22 people, and infected coming up the county road a little more often each night. That was the board. And into that board came the last piece, which was that the gate could no longer safely be a gate. 2 more of the dead had come up the road in the night, and Gene had dealt with one and the other had wandered off. And it wasn't 3 every couple days anymore. It was a couple every night and climbing, and a field full of parked cars and cooking fires, and frightened people was a light in a dark county that couldn't stay lit. I said the thing then. And I said it as a condition, not a deadline, because I'd learned that too. Starlight works as long as 2 things are true, I said. People can still get in, and people can still get out. Right now, both are barely true. When we can't do both anymore, when the gate's too dangerous to open for arrivals, or when there's no road left to send anybody out on, then it's not a meeting point anymore. It's a trap. And we don't wait to find that out the hard way. I looked at my mother. I think we're about a day from that line, maybe less. Nobody argued. Even my mother didn't argue, though I could see what it cost her, because arguing would have meant pretending we were somewhere we weren't. We got most of 1 more day. We ran the quarry grade twice that morning. Small, careful groups in the 5 decent vehicles, up and back. Gale sent them, and one came back to confirm the grade was passable, and then we sent the next, which is a thing you can only do when you've got a road short enough to scout. 14 people went up that grade in 2 runs. Toward a scattering of destinations Gale and my mother had stitched together the night before. Families threaded into the vehicles that could make the climb. The abandoned cars stayed abandoned. Pearl's doubtful car, the Bidwell van, 2 others. We pushed them all to the fence line and left them. Because a car that can't climb the grade is just a place a family used to be. And I'd made my peace with that. The yellow flags came out one last time, and they did the opposite of what I'd first used them for. I stuck one in the lead vehicle of each group so the cars behind could keep it in sight up the dust of the grade. I put one at the mouth of the south service lane, which we were finally using right, because with the county road gone dangerous, the south lane onto the quiet farm roads was the safer way out. Exactly as my mother had said, keep it clear 3 lifetimes ago. And I gave one to Lonnie, who'd appointed himself gate man, to wave a group forward when the road looked clear and to hold them when it didn't. Flags to move people. Flags to time the movement. Not 1 flag left in the ground marking a place to stay. The last meaningful arrival came around midday, right when we'd nearly convinced ourselves nobody else would. It was an old man and his adult daughter in a car that was steaming from under the hood, and the old man's name was Harlan, and my mother knew him the way she knew all of them. And this time, I watched the whole thing happen and understood it as the demonstration it was. They came in scared and steaming and out of options. Their car had just given up its last miles, reaching the one place the daughter half remembered her father talking about years ago, a place a woman named Elaine had told him to go if it ever came to this. And Starlight worked. It worked exactly the way it was built to. Gene looked at the steaming car and shook his head. One look, done. Dale looked at Harlan and told me quiet that he needed to sit and drink and could not ride in the back of anything. My mother sat with the daughter and found, in the tangle of the notebook, that they were trying for a place north and a little west that lined up close enough with the quarry grade's last run of the day. And I found them 2 seats in the last group's vehicles and folded Harlan into the one car with a real reclining seat and left their steaming car at the fence with the others. They'd arrived with nothing and no way forward. And within an hour, they were in a moving vehicle pointed at a person my mother had found for them. And that was the whole promise. Start to finish, the whole 17 years of it compressed into 1 hour I got to watch. Arrive, find each other, learn the road, combine, go. My mother didn't say anything about it. She just wrote Harlan plus daughter North Group 3 in the notebook and crossed nobody off, because they weren't people she'd been waiting for. They were people who'd remembered. "This is what it was for," I said to her. It wasn't a question. "This is what it was for," she said. We left last, the 2 of us and the 4 people from the returning Eastern group who'd become, over 3 days, something like the last residents. Lonnie and his family had gone up the grade in the second run. And Gail and Jean and Dale had each threaded out with groups they were needed in. Gail riding lead because somebody had to read that grade. Jean riding with the shakiest of the good vehicles because somebody had to nurse it. Dale riding with Otis and the Delmars because somebody had to keep the old man drinking. Everybody left inside their competence. That was the last good thing the field did. It put each of them where they were worth the most. By late afternoon, the county road wasn't safe to open for anybody, and there was no anybody left to open it for. And the quarry grade had 1 run left in it before the light went. That was the line I'd talked about. Both conditions failing at once. Nothing more could come in, and this was the last thing that could go out. Starlight had stopped being a meeting point somewhere in the last hour without anyone announcing it. My mother walked the empty field once before we went. Not slow, not weeping. She wasn't that kind of woman, and it wasn't that kind of moment. She just walked it, past the abandoned cars at the fence, past the concession block, past the dead marquee, and she stopped at the ticket booth and did the one thing she needed to do before she could leave. She'd written a note. I'd watched her write it that morning and hadn't understood until now what it was for. It wasn't a route. She knew better than to leave a route that would drown or burn the next person who trusted it. It wasn't a promise. It was a folded index card in a sandwich bag, taped inside the ticket booth window where anyone who came looking would find it. And it said in her cramped hand, "Starlight is not safe to stay. Do not wait here alone. If people come, go together. The roads change fast. Trust no road you haven't seen with your own eyes. Head high ground north." EM*, that was it. No comfort in it, because comfort would have been a lie, and my mother had spent her whole life refusing to lie to children in a crisis. Just the durable truth. Don't stay, don't wait alone, go together. Which was the whole promise stripped down to the part that would still be true a week from now for a stranger she'd never meet. "Somebody might still come," she said, looking at the card in the window, "after we're gone, and find nobody here." "I know," I said. And I did know, now, the exact weight of it, which I hadn't a week ago. The card's the best we can do for them. It tells them the one thing that stays true. Don't stay. Go together. It's not enough. "No," I said. "It's not. It's just what there is." She nodded, and she took her hand off the window glass, and we walked to the last car in the last group with the quarry grade's final light going gold on the screen tower behind us. We spent that night at a farm north of the grade, a place belonging to the family whose second cousin had absorbed Harlan and his daughter. A spread-out place with a barn and a well and room enough for the handful of us who'd come in on that last run to sleep under a roof. It wasn't safe. Nothing was safe. But it was high, and it was quiet, and the roads to it were bad enough that the dead didn't wander up them. And that was as much as anyone could ask for. Now, I couldn't sleep. So I sat up in the kitchen with a candle, and my mother's spiral notebook was on the table where she'd set it down. And I opened it. I'd spent my whole working life opening documents like that. Records of what a thing contained, what it was worth, what it could hold. I'd walked 1,000 properties with a clipboard, writing down square footage and drainage and access, appraising the value of places by what they could store and sell and shelter. And here was my mother's document, the least professional record I'd ever seen. Pages of names in cramped pencil, arrows and cross-outs and margin notes. Sister in Colby, no phone. Ruth's boy has the truck. Delmar's will take one more. Most of the names were crossed out. A crossed-out name meant a person on a road towards somewhere. A few weren't. The Odells, the Hardigans, names with no road beside them, people who'd remembered or hadn't, who'd come or hadn't, who my mother would carry now, the way she carried Wendell Cross from an ice storm 10 years gone. I found a pencil, and I started, without quite deciding to update it. Not the way she would have, but the way we did it now, together. The two records finally won. I wrote which groups had left and roughly when. I wrote the roads as they'd last been known. South gone, east burned, west drowned, Reservoir Road gone, quarry grade closing. I wrote who'd traveled with whom, so that if the notebook ever needed to be read by somebody trying to find somebody, the trail would be there. Harlan and his daughter, North Group 3. Corinne with strangers, North alive when we last saw her. Pearl West in the wagon before the ford. I wasn't counting vehicles. I hadn't counted a vehicle in days. I was keeping track of people and the directions they'd gone, which was the only inventory that mattered now, and which my mother had understood was the only inventory that mattered for 17 years, while I told her she was keeping an empty field alive. The field hadn't been empty. I'd just been appraising the wrong asset. My mother came in, unable to sleep either, and stood in the doorway and saw me bent over her notebook with a pencil. And she didn't say anything about it. She just came and sat down across the table and looked at what I'd added, and turned a page and pointed at a name I'd gotten in the wrong group. And I fixed it, and she nodded. Outside, one of the farm men called low across the yard. There was a vehicle to move at first light, the last of our run parked wrong, needing to be turned around so the group heading out in the morning wouldn't be boxed. Somebody who knew how to place a car in a tight yard was wanted. I closed the notebook and set it in front of my mother, where it belonged, and I got up to go help.